Hi BookTube, my name is Juan, I am just one reader, and today I am answering a wonderful tag that was just a couple of hours ago created by the lovely Sarah from Hardcover Hearts, and I swear it's one of the most original, creative, wonderful tags that I've seen in a long while. It's the All the Feels tag, and the prompts or questions in this tag revolve around senses and feelings and emotions and reactions, overall reactions that we get when we're reading, when we experience literature or reading or whatever. So the first question is, what's your instinctive physical expression of delight with a book? So when I when I really enjoy a book, when I can really tell if I am genuinely loving the experience of reading a book and I am finding it completely delightful, is when I catch myself sort of finishing a paragraph or a little snippet of the text, a sentence or a paragraph or a chapter or whatever, and I'll just kind of go like, that's, to me, that indicates that I read something that resonated with me. I will also do weird things like, it kind of sounds sexual in a way. But you know what? Reading is an act of intimacy. So a little bit like sex, it involves feeling when the book is good and when the book is right for you, specifically when you make a connection, a match with a book, there is an act of closeness and intimacy and a lot of delight to be found in there. So I will find myself doing things like that, like, or so to me, that means that I am really connecting with a book. And again, it sounds very sexual, but I guess it is in a way, you know? Question number 2 is, has there ever been a specific meal or food passage in a book that was memorable to you? And this was incredible because, it's one of those times when you discover how two readers can feel the same way about a very specific scene in a book. Because when Sarah, who originated this tag, who created this wonderful tag, was giving her answers for this, she read the question, I thought of my answer, and she gave the same answer. And it was like, we matched, So I'm gonna give the same answer that Sarah gave, but that is, this is my Spanish copy that I read when I was 9 years old. This is The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, which is book 1 in the Chronicles of Narnia. And the scene that I'm talking about that made both Sarah and I visualize and taste, particularly taste, the food passage that we found really wonderful is the scene in which the White Witch gives this candy called Turkish Delights to, I think is Edmund. Is his name? I think his name is Edmund. Anyway, he's like I think it's Edmund. And anyway, I remember this chapter called Turkish Delights, and I remember reading that scene when I was 9 years old, or maybe younger, maybe 8 years old. And there's a drawing where you can see, where is it? I don't know if there's a drawing, but anyway, I remember reading that scene of Edmund taking the candy from the witch and eating it, and just, I remember that so distinctly. Like, it's incredible how some authors can do that, can really paint not a picture, but a feeling, a physical sensation. So that is my answer. Now, question number 3 is, what was the first or most intense memory of seeing, visualizing a scene or a passage very clearly? And I actually have the answer. It's very clear to me because I do remember the first time that I read Harry Potter. This is, by the way, the Spanish edition that I read when I was 7 years old. And I think it's chapter number 6. No, I think it's chapter number 8. Yeah. The beginning of chapter number 8 is when J.K. Rowling describes Hogwarts for the first time. Not the outside of Hogwarts, but the inside of the castle, you know, how things work and, you know, the little quirky, whimsical things that are going on. You know, there I remember picturing the frames with the people talking in it, you know, the picture, the talking pictures, and the moving staircases, the stairwells. And she also mentioned that there were some doors in some corridors that would open on a Tuesday, but only on Tuesdays, something like that, something very funny and kind of whimsical and delightfully strange. Very whimsical descriptions, and I remember picturing Hogwarts. That's my first memory of reading, really. The next question is number 4. When was the last time that you slammed a book shut or threw a book out of rage, disgust, or frustration? I have 2 answers. One is sort of my fault, and the other one is clearly not my fault. So the one that is kind of my fault is Robin Hobb's The Ship of Magic. This is book 1 in the Life Ship Traders trilogy, which is this epic fantasy trilogy that I really wanted to love. I read the first book in the series, and I didn't really like it. I wasn't clicking with it. But the thing that really set me off was when I was finishing the book, I had to drive. I had to go home in my car, and I was driving, and something happened in the city. There was a huge, chaotic traffic jam, and I was stuck in traffic. This is something that happens quite often in Mexico City. I was stuck in traffic for 2 hours and 45 minutes in the same exact position, in the same location, no movement. I mean, I could have stepped out of the car and left. Of course, I couldn't because it was raining, it was pouring, you know, it was raining cats and dogs and everything, so I couldn't leave. I was stuck in my car for 3 hours with this book. I finished reading this book and I was so frustrated because of the traffic, because of the rain, because I didn't like the book. The overall experience was just so frustrating. And I remember when I finished the book, I just threw it across my you know, the other to the other seat of the car, and I just put there, and I didn't want to look at it. So that one was kind of my fault for reading the book while stuck in traffic. It was obviously a very frustrating experience. However, the one that it was not my fault was when I read this horrible thing that should not exist, Harry Potter and the Cursed Child, parts 1 and 2. So when I read this book, everything was wrong. I knew from very very soon into the book, like maybe around page 50 or something, that this book was going to be a train wreck, and it just got worse and worse and worse. Like I remember when I read the part where we discover that Voldemort has a daughter. That really tested my mental health. That was trauma. That was the definition of a traumatic experience. Reading this book was. So I remember I finished this book in a storm of rage, and I threw it across the room. I don't want this book in my house. I'm probably gonna give it away, but no one wants it. Of course, no one wants it. So I think I'm just gonna throw it out. Throw it out. Yeah, I don't want it here. Excuse me. Question number 5, moving on to happier things. Have you ever been startled by a passage in a book that is not a thriller or a suspense or horror book? So this is, you know, when you're reading something that is not genre fiction, that is supposed to scare you or startle you, but sometimes you find yourself gasping or feeling like this kind of sudden rush of adrenaline or whatever. And that happened to me when I was reading 84 Charing Cross Road by Helene Hanff. which, by the way, this is my favorite book so far of 2019. I am so in love with this book, and Sarah from Hardcover Hearts and I have been gushing about this book, this author, etc. So when I was reading this book, when I read the ending, I don't want to spoil it because if you haven't read it, you really, really should. But there's something that we find out in one of the letters in the end. And when I read that, I remember that I audibly gasped, like I was watching the finale of a soap opera, you know, when they reveal that the villain is actually the hero's father or something, like, you know, like, I'm your father. Like Darth Vader revelation kind of gasp. I was like, oh, like I audibly gasped in disbelief. So yeah, that is definitely the last time that that happened to me. Oh, and it was so shocking. I'm still recovering. Anyway, question number 6 is, what was the last time that you laughed with or at a book? And that was with my Woodhouse. I love me some Woodhouse. I love P.G. Woodhouse. I've only read a couple of his works, but I find that he's just the right guy for me. And the last book that I read by him was in this anthology, and it was hilarious. I just found myself laughing out loud, uproariously. So yeah, love Woodhouse. Finally, question number 7 is, what book made you feel expansive? And by expansive, Sarah means feeling sort of uplifted, hopeful, like your soul is uplifted and enriched in a way. You know, you feel expansive. And so I think the last time that I felt something like that was with the Bookshop book by Jen Campbell, who is on BookTube. She's our very own Jen Campbell. And I read this book this year, and it made me feel hopeful. It made me feel love. I found this book to be incredibly loving and loveful, just full of love. A heart full of love. Les Mis? No one? Anyway, I found this book to be just full of love and care, and you know, it's like that episode of Friends where the one where Ross goes to the library because, you know, he has a book that he wrote, his dissertation paper that he wrote is on the campus library, and he goes to the library and he goes to the counter, and he says to the librarian, if no one cares about the sanctity of the written word. And that's how this book made me feel. It made me feel the sanctity of the written word, and I felt expansive and hopeful. And finally, we have some bonus questions that Sarah suggested, and of course I'm going to answer both of them. The first bonus is read us a passage that made you feel and tell us what you felt. So I'm choosing a very, very, very small, very short snippet of The Ocean at the End of the Lane by Neil Gaiman. It's a book that I read some years ago, and I'm going to read you the ending. There's no spoiler whatsoever. You know, if you've never read it, it doesn't matter. It's just a beautiful, beautiful passage, and it goes like this. Curiously, I turned in my seat and looked back. A single half-moon hung over the farmhouse, peaceful and pale and perfect. I wondered where the illusion of the second moon had come from, but I only wondered for a moment, and then I dismissed it from my thoughts. Perhaps it was an after-image, I decided, or a ghost, something that had stirred in my mind for a moment, so powerfully that I believed it to be real, but now was gone, and faded into the past like a memory forgotten or a shadow into the dusk. So if you read it like that, out of context, it doesn't really give you much. But if you put it into the context of the book, I remember reading that closing passage really made me feel very sad, but also very happy. And it's a book, in general, a book that really made me feel very sad and mournful, because it is about, in a way, about losing your childhood, but being able to incorporate some of the things from your childhood within you, and keeping them, but most of those memories, most of those experiences are gone forever. So I thought the book, as a reflection on losing your childhood and growing up and all of those mournful states, was remarkable, and it made me feel very sad, but strangely uplifted as well. And finally, the other bonus question was, what was a specific sense memory that a book evoked in you? And I'm going to read you now the opening lines of The Crimson Petal and the White by Michel Faber. Basically, we are in London in the Victorian era, Victorian London. And I love how this book starts, because it opens up like this and it really evokes the senses. So it goes like this. Watch your step. Keep your wits about you. You will need them. This city I'm bringing you to is vast and intricate, and you have not been here before. You may imagine from other stories that you've read that you know it well, but those stories flattered you, welcoming you as a friend, treating you as if you belonged. The truth is that you are an alien from another time and place altogether. When I first caught your eye and you decided to come with me, you were probably thinking you would simply arrive and make yourself at home. Now that you're actually here, the air is bitterly cold, and you find yourself being led along in complete darkness, stumbling on uneven ground, recognizing nothing. Looking left and right, blinking against the icy wind, you realize you have entered an unknown street of unlit houses full of unknown people. And it just goes on from there, and we evoke visuals, we evoke sounds, images, a lot of smells, disgusting smells of London, very disgusting sights, very disgusting images of things that are happening in the city and the streets and everything. So that is a great sensory experience. So that was the All the Feels book tag. Thank you, Sarah, for creating it and for tagging me. I honestly don't know who to tag, because Sarah has already tagged everyone that I wanted to tag except for Steve Donahue. So I'm going to tag Steve, and I'm going to be hopeful. I'm going to trust that Steve is going to tag everybody else, because he usually does. So Steve, that's your job. So thanks for watching this wonderful tag. I am Juan from Just One Reader, and I will see you on the next video.